Hola, estudiantes. Today we are going to talk about the numbers 0 through 30. So first off, if you're using Voces, it's just really good to know where you can find this. If you'll open up chapter 1 and go to Los Números del 0 al 30 from your table of contents right there, that will take you here. So one of my favorite things about Voces is that it has these audio things next to the word. So if you'll click on the audio,
Cero.
it will say the word for you. So if you're ever in doubt about the pronunciation, you have that resource there. So that is wonderful. So when we're learning the numbers, I think it's good to break this up into 4 steps. So step number 1, if you already know the numbers 0 through 10, then wonderful, you're ahead of the curve. If you don't know those numbers yet, it's really easy to pick those up pretty quickly if you will just practice them. Instead of counting in English, start counting in Spanish. If you see a phone number, instead of saying it in English, say it in Spanish. So that is step number 1. If you don't know those, start there. Now step number 2, that is 11 through 15. And this is where we actually start seeing a pattern. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So they all end in se, and that's your hint that it's that group of numbers there. And these are mostly easy to recognize. So 11 looks like once, so it makes sense that it would have a 1 in it. 12, if you already know your single digit numbers, then you know dos is 2, and dos and 12 are very similar. Now, one thing to be careful of there, this is not a word in Spanish. So if you write that down, I don't know if you mean dos or doce, so be really careful there. Same deal with tres and trece, 3 and 13. They're really, really similar. So trece is a pretty easy add-on there. And just like with doce, spelling it D-O-S-E, you want to be really careful with tres and trece. If you spell it like this, I'm not sure if you mean tres or trece. So be really careful there. Now with 4 cuatro and 14 catorce, that's a bit more of a stretch, but they're still pretty similar. So just work on that. Cuatro, catorce, they're similar. And then 15, that one really does not look like 5, cinco and quince. But with quince, if you have ever heard of a quinceañera, that is a big deal. It's a girl's 15th birthday party, and so 15 being quince. If you've not heard of that, then you're just going to need to specifically work on that number. I will say 14 and 15 tend to be the numbers that give people the most trouble. So that is step number 2, just 5 numbers, specifically work on those. And then step number 3 is starting to behave very similarly to what we do in English. So 16 through 19, think about what we do in English. 16, 17, 18, 19. And what we actually do with these numbers is we're doing an addition problem. So if I added 10 and 6, so 10 plus 6 equals 16. If I were to say that in Spanish, 10, we just saw is diez. And then to say plus in Spanish is y. It also means and, so 10 and 6 or 10 plus 6. So diez y seis equals, we say son. So 10 plus 6 equals diez y seis son. And then let's look back at what 16 is. Diez y seis. That should sound familiar. Diez y seis son diez y seis. So all we did here is we took diez y seis, turned it into one long word, changed up the spelling just a bit. So we'll do the same thing for 17, 18, and 19. So 17 is 10 plus 7. So diez y siete. That would be 10 plus 7. Change up the spelling a bit. Change that Z to a C. Change the Y to an I. Siete. One nice long word, 17. So you do that for all 4 of those numbers, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And do notice there's an accent on that E in 16. And that's just a pronunciation thing that you'll learn about later. So then step number 4 is 20 through 30. So with 20 through 30, you want to memorize 20. And then we're back to doing an addition problem. So if I wanted to say 23, that's 20 plus 3. And 20 we know is 20 plus y 3, tres. And we're going to turn that into one long word, change up the spelling just a bit. So 20. So take out the E and Y, replace it with an I. 23. If you want to do 29, same thing. 20 plus 9. So 20 is 20 plus y 9, 9. Change the spelling up, make it one long word, 29. And you've got it. So that is step number 4. I would definitely work on one thing at a time. So let's talk about a very important question and answer that you have probably already seen at this point that uses numbers. So if we're using numbers, and this is just the beginning of Spanish, we're learning how to say things about ourselves. ¿Cuántos años tienes is a question that's going to come up. So we translate this as how old are you? So how old are you? Now literally, ¿cuántos means how many? Años is years. And tienes is do you have. So how many years do you have? And this is just something that Latin-based languages do when we're asking about how old somebody is. We always ask how many years they have. So if the question literally is how many years do you have, the response literally is I have however many years. And then we would translate this as I'm however many years old. So practice that. If you are 15 years old, then yes, you can write it like this. Tengo something años, but you're not speaking Spanish if you say tengo 15 años. You need to know that number in Spanish. So you want to know how to say 15. Tengo 15 años. So practice that, practice it with friends, teach it to your family members and friends and all that stuff, and you will get it in a snap. So one more time with your steps. Step 1, 0 through 10. Step 2, 11 through 15. Step 3, 16 through 19. And step 4, 20 through 30. Now with 30, there's a whole different pattern, so don't try to do what we've already done with the 20s. It's just slightly different, but very similar.